So you're the finder of lost children.
Oh, you must have saw me on television. Yeah, I like working with children.
Hey, Chandler, come on, will you, okay?
Shut up! Hi.
So you're the finder of lost children.
Oh, you must have saw me on television.
A child has been kidnapped.
When?
5 days ago in northeastern Tibet.
Well, Tibet's a little bit out of my territory.
This child is special, Mr. Jarrell. His destiny is to save the world.
That's a good destiny. Listen, who would want to take the kid anyway?
Those who want evil rather than good.
I want you to go to Tibet.
It's freezing in Tibet.
By the time he finds you, it will be too late. You've no idea who I am, have you?
Yes! You're Sado Nupsi!
I could destroy you, just like that.
The Golden Child arrived on our screens in December of 1986 and was moderately successful at the box office, making nearly 80 million in the USA on a budget of nearly 25 million. This was the first Eddie Murphy feature to be a critical failure. The Washington Post said it was a half-baked comedy with no heart, but Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars and enjoyed the film. Its box office results were well below Paramount Studios' expectations though. Eddie previously had great success with Beverly Hills Cop, which made over 300 million worldwide, so the studio was banking on this being a huge hit. The production had encountered problems from the start. Originally John Carpenter had been attached and the style of the movie was aiming to be something more serious, but after Carpenter left to work with 20th Century Fox on Big Trouble in Little China, Paramount decided to go with a comedy approach and cast Eddie Murphy in the lead role. The script for The Golden Child was written by Dennis Feldman, who would later go on to write Species and Virus, which both deal with strong sci-fi elements, so a lot of his script may have been changed by him or maybe some uncredited writers to incorporate more comedy. It certainly feels a lot of the fancy elements have been diluted to suit Eddie Murphy's style. There does seem to be an obvious competition between Fox and Paramount, with Big Trouble and Golden Child sharing similar themes of Oriental mythology and culture, and also both films share the same actors. Victor Wong, James Hong and Peter Kwong all star in Big Trouble as well, and I think provide better performances in that film. The film starts in a temple in northeastern Tibet. A young boy with mystical abilities, the Golden Child, demonstrates his powers to the monks of the temple by reviving a dead bird, which becomes a companion throughout the film. However, a band of villains led by a mysterious man, Sardo Numpspa, played by Charles Dance, breaks into the hidden temple, slaughters the monks, and abducts the boy. Sometime afterwards, a young woman named Ki Nang, played by Charlotte Lewis, who has travelled to Los Angeles, is watching a TV show in which a social worker, Eddie Murphy, playing as Chandler Jarrell, talks about his latest case, a missing girl named Cheryl Mosley. She seeks him out the next day and informs him of the kidnapping of the Golden Child, and that he is the chosen one who would save the child. Chandler doesn't take this seriously. Soon Cheryl Mosley is found dead from blood loss near an abandoned house smearing with Tibetan graffiti and a pot full of blood-soaked oatmeal. Ki Nang reveals to him that this house was a holding place for the child and introduces Chandler to Dr. Hong, a mystic expert, and Carla, who remains hidden behind a screen, who offers him advice. They track down a motorcycle gang, the Yellow Dragons, which Cheryl had joined. and Chinese restaurant owner Tommy Tong, a henchman of Numpspa, to whom Cheryl has been sold for her blood, used to make the child vulnerable to earthly harm. Tong, however, is killed by Numpspa as a potential traitor. Still not taking the case too seriously, Chandler is drawn into a controlled dream by Numpspa, whom Chandler begins to continuously call Numpsy, where he receives a burn mark on his arm. Numpspa also presents his demands, the Ajanti dagger, the only weapon to kill the Golden Child in exchange for the boy. Chandler finally agrees to help. Chandler and Key travel to Tibet, where Chandler is apparently swindled by an old amulet seller, who is revealed as the high priest of the temple where the dagger is kept hidden, and subsequently is Key's father. In order to obtain the blade, Chandler has to pass a test, an obstacle course in a bottomless cavern, whilst carrying a glass of water without spilling a drop. With luck and wits, Chandler recovers the blade. The visual effects in Golden Child were handled by George Lucas's effects company, ILM, and the effects were generally very good in the film. There are a number of shots that do look a bit ropey, down to them being a bit too ambitious, and the effects team not being able to fully realise the shots down to the technology available. The best effects they seemed to visualise well was the demon at the end. The stop motion animation is very effective, and they use a lot of filters over the top to soften the image to mask the obvious methods of stop motion. It's definitely the standout piece of the movie. There are other scenes featuring stop motion, with the child making a can of Pepsi come to life, and dance for one of the thugs for entertainment. It's very well done, but clearly stands out as an effect, and kind of takes you out of the movie. The one shot I did laugh at was the reveal of the mysterious witch lady who offers Eddie Murphy advice. She turns out to be half snake. The effects in high definition looked really bad, and looked like a 2D cut and paste job. It's definitely the weakest effects shot in the film in my opinion. When Charles Dance talks to what it appears to be Satan or someone of that nature, the transition to the other dimension is executed very well, with the bricks coming apart and being sucked into the background, and with him being surrounded by fire. The optical effects blend well and look very polished. All round the effects are solid, but there aren't many of them to be honest, which is a shame. The score to the film was originally composed by John Barry, and he did produce a complete soundtrack, but due to creative differences with the studio or the director, they decided to change it completely and replace him with French composer Michel Columbia. But a couple of tracks of John's did turn up in the film. John Barry's work was thankfully released as part of a limited edition release of the soundtrack a couple of years ago. The music John Barry produced does sound tremendous. It has an epic sound to it and done in a classical way, with many elements of jazz thrown in, and some areas sound very familiar to his James Bond scores at the time. But once you've listened to it fully, or even just a couple of tracks, you soon realise it doesn't suit the film, and I can understand why they changed it. If, say, the movie was taken far more seriously, then Barry's work would suit it perfectly, but with the comedic tones, the music just feels like it belongs to another movie. The new score by Michel was a lot more contemporary and fitted the comedic styles, and felt more appropriate for this film. There is some nice electronic themes in the movie, and as soon as the film starts, the music kicks in and doesn't let up. It's a great soundtrack to listen to, and definitely worth hunting down the limited edition set just to get John Barry's work. The biggest problem I had with The Golden Child is that the story isn't really that interesting. The backstory is very flimsy and weak. The movie moves along at a very quick pace. Within 15 minutes, Eddie Murphy is already accepting the offer of rescuing the Golden Child. It all seems rather rushed. The film is edited by Richard Harris, who had previously worked with the director on Fletch, and he went on to be nominated for Academy Award on Terminator 2, so he clearly knows how to edit. But from watching The Golden Child, it all seems very clunky, and has random shots thrown in that feel out of place or cut too quickly. The fight scenes are very poorly handled, with some embarrassingly bad reversal shots, and loads of pointless shots of Keenan doing backflips. Her scenes also incorporate cheesy sound effects which don't suit the film. Also, it feels like scenes are missing because of the way the film jumps from one scene to the other. There appears to be no special edition of The Golden Child on DVD and Blu-ray, so I don't think Paramount care much about the movie, so it's hard to determine if there is actually footage deleted, but it just feels you're missing some of the plot because of the sloppy direction. The director Michael Ritchie generally made movies that were sports related or had a heavy use of comedy, which you would think would work with The Golden Child, and yes it does in some places, but with a lot of story focusing on fantasy elements and action, he is totally out of his depth. He shoots everything in medium and close-ups, which gives no scale to the movie, and it all feels boxed in, and you only get a sense of the large locations with the establishing shots. The tone of the movie is very uneven. It plays the comedy card and bounces to being serious, and with Eddie Murphy's character being invited to a crime scene of a dead girl. The film doesn't know what it wants to be, so as a viewer you kind of feel some of the scenes just don't work or feel very inappropriate. When people make the comparisons between Big Trouble and The Golden Child, John Carpenter's film clearly outshines The Golden Child in every area, despite it being far less successful at the box office. It has a consistent tone, better performances, slicker direction, and feels larger in scale with its visuals, and overall has a far more interesting story. The one saving grace of The Golden Child is Eddie Murphy, who tries his best to make the comedy work, and he is clearly ad-libbing his scenes on the spot to add a bit more to what could have been a very flat comedy. When he is on screen, the movie is enjoyable, but everything else is unexciting and I must say poorly directed. Charles Dance is a great actor and I admire his performances in other films such as Last Action Hero, but in this film his talents are totally wasted. His dialogue is bland and would fit any stereotypical villain. He doesn't have much to work with, unfortunately. It's great hearing the voice of Frank Welker during the scene where Charles Dance talks to the demon. Where you hear his voice in the film, it sounds just like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. Frank has provided his voice talent to many of my favourite cartoons I watched as a kid, and it's always a pleasure hearing his voice. I have friends who really like this film, but I think the majority of people that grew up watching The Golden Child and fondly remember it probably just like it for its comedy, and I bet the rest of the movie they probably don't care much about. After watching this film again for this review, I found it funny in places and there are some neat visual effects. The whole film is very forgettable. There is far superior Eddie Murphy movies to watch, and The Golden Child was the first hiccup in his career. He then started to make a number of errors, starring in a number of box office and critical failures, such as Harlem Nights, Another 48 Hours, Boomerang and Beverly Hills Cop 3. I wouldn't say the film is underrated. I think it's been rated fairly by critics and online reviewers. It certainly has its problems and many have been highlighted by other critics and me. It's certainly not awful, and it's fun to watch but nothing you should rush out to see. But when you get a chance, or if you catch it on TV one night, it's certainly a film that will keep you entertained for an hour and a half.
Why is the child still alive?
You have no reason to fear him. He is surrounded at all times and in all the four directions by evil.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child. Time grows short. The child will never eat the blood.
What must I do?
Move the child before the Chosen One draws near.
And to kill him?
The jaunty dagger. It is not of this world.
I said, I want the knife. I got the knife! Now turn on the goddamn light!
Oh, shit. We're gonna get you out of here, okay?
Hey, where's your boss? My dear sweet brother Noopsy! I can see you're busy right now.